Started doing any work in the shop, we got to cover some general safety that we're going to be using from now until the end of the school year, and you can apply this for anything else that you're doing the rest of your life when you're working with tools or equipment. The first is always wear eye protection. We always want to make sure we wear our safety glasses. We want to protect our eyes. You do not want to have an accident where your eyes are involved.
I'm too cool for safety goggles.
Rules, we want to get permission first. Before you use any machines, you want to make sure that you have my permission to use that machine. If you have any questions, we can go over those, and before you're able to use any of the machines, you will have to pass a number of safety tests that get you approved to use that machine. And then even that.
Oh, hello.
Danny, are you in here alone?
I sure am.
Well, Danny, I'm afraid you're breaking the rules.
The rule I want to talk about is if you have long hair, you have to tie that long hair back. I don't have long hair, short hair. It's not going to get in my way when I'm working. There's no chance of my short hair getting caught up in a machine and pulling my face into that machine.
The student, not so well.
Next general safety rule, when we're in the shop, we always have to have closed-toed shoes. You might wonder, what are closed-toed shoes? If you can see any skin on your feet, those are not closed-toed shoes. Flip-flops, sandals, anything where a part of the top of your foot is exposed is not a closed-toed shoe.
No sandals. Because things happen.
Okay, next general safety rule, whenever we're in the shop, we don't want to wear any loose clothing, baggy clothing, and also we have to make sure that our pants are pulled up. This is a safety issue. Loose clothing can get caught in machines. If it gets caught in a machine, it pulls you in.
Please choose appropriate clothing for the shop.
In the shop, we want to remove all jewelry before we go to work. In the shop, rings, necklaces, long earrings, any of that stuff, we want to make sure we take them off.
Do I have a hood on or do I have strings on? I don't have either one on today. If I had a hooded sweatshirt or something with strings on it, I would have to remove that.
We don't care for students using the equipment with headsets on.
In the shop. Horseplay is when any goofing around of any type. When we're in the shop here, we're working, we're producing products, we're manufacturing things, we're producing works of art, whatever we're working on, we need to be concentrating on that.
Hey Jordan, don't hit me. Stop it. Stop. Stop.
By chance you do get into an accident in the shop, you need to report that to me. Report all accidents or any injuries that you incur. Even if it's just a little cut on your finger, you got poked by a piece of metal, you got a little cut, come and see me, I'll give you a Band-Aid, we'll take care of that. The last general safety rule that I want to talk to you guys about is just, if you are ever in doubt in the shop, come and ask me about what you're supposed to be doing. If you go to use a machine and you're not quite sure, maybe you haven't used it in a few weeks, and you forgot how to use that, or you forgot a certain aspect of that machine, come and talk to me.
Oh, what's this do? Ah!
I think it's already starting.
Let's go teach you how to use the saw. If you have a saw, be very, 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 very,
Because
very,
he almost might cut us in half.
He can cut your finger off, your hand, your nose.
No. I know how to use a saw because I'm a builder too.
But I'm the teacher. I can still teach you. You need gloves and
Okay, I'll get gloves. I already got one.
you forgot something. Glasses.
Glasses.
For know what chips would get in your eyes to mess it up.
Well, I'm a builder because I work with builder clothes on and glasses.
That got to do with standard. To teach by the standard. But cinder can
You
make
have to have gloves.
gloves and some
What else?
and some
And some what?
and that's all. And you need to it can grind anything. It can even grind metal.
Ooh, amazing.
But you have to
Keep moving.
fine. Let go teach you about the drill. The drill, it can make holes in it.
Yeah, I know. I know everything about it.
You have to be pretty good by doing these.
Next.
If you have a hammer, you get the nail, you put it in the,
And then we get
Drown
gloves
it.
and then we
You
nail it in. Yeah, I know.
then you put it in, then
And
you,
then you whack it.
not like that, like this. Like you do softly tips.
This is taking too long. I'm just gonna hammer.
You need gloves.
Ham. My thumb!
I told you so. Nail, you put it in, you hold it like this, then you have your hammer and you tip it in, then it's
Just,
Sam, pretend you don't know anything about sand tools.
This demonstration covers the bandsaw, how it works and how to set it up safely. The bandsaw works, if I open the door up, this is a 14-inch bandsaw and it works with a 14-inch diameter wheel on the top and the bottom of the bandsaw. The blade itself is one 12-foot, usually 10, 12-foot long blade that's continuous. So if I turn it on, it's continuously running and cutting. So this saw cuts very quickly. So as it's cutting, or as it's running, the wheels are high centered, so the blade really isn't on there very tightly. So, to keep it from falling off, they put ball bearings, one on each side of the blade to make sure it doesn't go left or right. There's another ball bearing behind the blade to make sure it doesn't get pushed off as I'm cutting forward. There is nothing to stop it from coming off towards you if you're pulling back. So there's certain things you need to make sure to do so we don't pull the blade off the track. Now when you cut, I want you to make sure that the guard is about 1/4 of an inch above your board. There's a knob in the back and you just lift it up and down. That way my smallest finger doesn't have enough room to get under this ball bearing to get into the blade. So the only way that you can cut yourself for the most part is if my finger is extended in line with that blade, which is much harder to do because most people are quick enough to pull a finger back should they get close to the blade. When you're cutting, and I'll raise this up for some of it just so you can see the blade, make sure that you're not getting a burn on the end. Sometimes as you cut, the blade will actually burn the end of your board just a little bit. Usually that'll mean that it's dull or you're going a little bit too slow. Most of the time it's because it's dull. If the blade gets dull, let me know. I have a couple more in the back. I can just switch the blade to a new one. As you're cutting, generally speaking, let's say I'm just cutting a straight line like this. If I just want to cut that off, it only cuts straight forward. So I have to line it up like this so the line is pointing at the saw blade. I've had a number of kids put it in so like this, thinking that they'll get this cut. So what happens is they start cutting here and they realize as they get to the line, I'm going the wrong direction. I'll end up cutting straight through it if I'm not careful. So they stop, twist the board, and then try to keep cutting. Now, when I turn this on for a moment, have a look at the blade, you'll see that the blade kind of clicks. It does this, little at a time. The reason that happens is because they put this in and twisted the blade and bent it. Fortunately, it didn't break, so that's good. However, now that it's doing this, it's going to leave it's going to click as it goes through the board and leave your line a little bit more jagged than it should be. So be careful to always line your board up straight at what you're cutting. It needs to be relatively a straight line. If I need to turn a little bit as I'm going, that's fine, but it needs to be pointing at the blade. Why is it important to keep moving forward if you're cutting a curve? Well, let's put a simple curve on there. Okay, like that, say. As I'm cutting, I know I would need to start this curve facing this way and then cut and turn as I go. If I stop turning, let's say I'm cutting off of the line, I'll use my pencil on this one. I'm cutting and I start getting off the line. If I stop, twist to get it back in line and then start going back again, I've just bent the blade, and most of the time that'll actually break the blade. Like I said, this must be a good one because it didn't break the time the kid twisted. However, by stopping, I'm forcing the blade to twist and then try to start cutting again. So what I should have done is either back it out and start cutting again, or just turned into that curve to get back on my line. And then I'd come back and clean that up later. So why is it important to keep moving forward? Because you could either break or twist the blade, similar to number 3 on your sheet. How do you keep from having to back out of a long curve? Well, let's just use the same curve. If this curve is tight enough that you don't think the blade can make it around in one pass, simply make what are called relief cuts. Relief cuts are simply some little cuts that go in and out again. So if I simply put it on here and go in, just to the line, the curve and back, just to the curve and out, just to the curve and out, and so forth. I've made these 3 and I've got a couple more to make. Now when I go back and cut, I cut to here, this piece falls off. Then I cut the rest here and that falls off and this falls off and so forth. There's no wood left on my board to pinch the blade as I'm turning it. You've always got to push forward, but if it's too tight of a curve, say like this, I've got to put those relief cuts in there to relieve the pressure, hence the name. So my blade doesn't get pinched and start burning the wood or snapping in two. Number 6, if you're following a pencil line while cutting, we need to cut just off of the line. So again, let's say I've got a curve here. Let's say that. I need to stay off the line just a little bit. Say I want to cut this piece out. I want to stay just inside this line, about a 1/16 to an 1/8 of an inch, so that this line, the original, is still there. Because when I'm done cutting, this blade does not leave a very smooth edge at all. It's always very jagged. It's got a lot of lines on it that we need to sand out. So if I cut on the line and then sand, I'm now here about a 1/16 to an 1/8 smaller than I wanted. So if I stay off the line the whole way through and then sand it, I still have a line to sand too. I can see where I need to stop. So you want to cut just off of your original pencil line so that you can sand down to that line and it's the right size. Number 7 is pretty obvious. You never want to put your finger in line with the blade. That especially is your thumb. That typically is what I've seen get into the blades is a thumb. So you need to be careful. Nothing in line with the blade you don't intend to get cut. If the blade does break while you're cutting, going around a sharp corner, whatever, this one's a little bit different than the others. Because I have seen the blade break and it comes around the top, the end hits the table and kind of shoots off to the side. I don't want my hands here where I'm cutting. It could slice across my fingers and I don't want that. So make sure if it breaks, you'll hear a very loud bang and everything stops moving for a moment. You want to back off. Get your hands out of the way. Once I know nothing is going to be shooting out at all, then go ahead and turn it off and I will change the blade and see if there's any damage and we'll fix that. How do you back out of a long curvy cut? Well, let's say I've got a cut that I can't back out, or I can't cut all the way through, I mean. Nice sharp curves. For some reason I have to stop there and pull it back out again. So I've got it here, made the cut, I've stopped, now I got to pull it back out. Now remember I said there's no ball bearing on here to keep it from falling off forward. If I pull this out and I give it just a little too hard of a tug, the blade will fall off the wheel. And if that happens, we have to turn it off and see if there's damage and reset it and realign it and so forth. So simply turn off the machine, let it come to a complete stop, and then pull it out. I can give it a good yank with it not running, and it will stay on the wheels, and they'll stay aligned. So simply turn it off if you're afraid you might pull it off the track. How do you cut around a sharp 90-degree corner? That's the last question on your sheet. Let's see here. Put a dark blue line here and here. Now normally, if I have a long line and a short line, I would always cut the short one first because I want to back out of the shorter line. I always want to back out of the shorter line, less chance of pulling it off the blade. And then I'd cut the long one and this would fall away. Now let's say for whatever reason, I do not want to back out. I just want to cut and finish the cut without pulling back out of the wood. Here's how you do it. Cut all the way up this line to your other line and stop. back off about an inch, only about an inch, and then round cut that corner out. So now this is gone. Then I simply back cut right here, and then this is gone. So 1, 2, 3. Cut up to the line, back out and round cut that corner, and then back cut whatever's left. 3 steps. So when you're cutting, it doesn't matter to me if you're cutting with your hands like this, both sides, or even just one-handed. Either way works just fine. Turn it on, and I can cut like this. Now my finger is somewhat in line with the blade, so I'm just going to move it out of the way as I get close and cut it off. You can turn it, you can cut it, whatever you want. So as you can, it's hard to see, but let's see if I can scuff that up. It doesn't leave a very good cut. It got a lot of lines on there. It's harder to see on the camera. One of the last questions on the test, what if I have a narrow piece of wood that I need to cut in half? Now what I don't want is my fingers pinching the blade next to it. It's too easy to get in there. So here's what you do. Let me bring that down just a little bit more. Turn it on and cut as far as you can. Now I'm starting to get a little nervous. I'm within about an inch. Simply reach around the back, further away, and just pull it the rest of the way out. Very simple. So if you got a narrow piece of wood, feel free to pull it and get it out the back when you're done. And then all of my scrap pieces go into the trash. I just don't want you to throw them on the floor. Sawdust on the floor here, it's almost like an ice skating rink. These don't help. They actually will make you roll your ankle a little bit here and there. So make sure to throw everything away into the trash. So the bandsaw, we use the bandsaw mostly for in-between projects. You got some extra time, you can make a plaque, cut out letters, whatever, that's fine. We do use it twice on the nightstand, one for your door and once for your base trim. But as you're using the bandsaw, it's a fun machine to use, but you need to be very careful to keep your fingers out of the line of the blade, and always make sure to line up whatever you're cutting directly in line with the blade, so you don't have to twist. So doing that will make sure that the saw is able to cut correctly and that you stay safe. This demonstration covers the power sanders, the disc sander and the belt sander. Now I've actually got 3 big sanders in the shop, and the other one is called a drum sander. It's a large tube of sandpaper that spins around while it goes up and down, and that's located directly over there against the wall. Now the reason I don't really focus on that one is because the chances of you hurting yourself on that are much, much less than these 2. Specifically the disc sander. Most of the accidents I've ever seen on a power sander machine has been on a disc sander. So I like to focus on that one most. Now this machine, as you can see, this got 2 sanders in one machine. You hit on and they both turn on. I don't mind if I have one person using the disc sander and one person using the belt sander at the same time. But I don't want to see multiple people around one sander trying to get in there. That's when danger happens. That's when an accident could happen. On all of these sanders, you need to hold the board the same way. I just don't want your fingers under the board while you're cutting, trying to do it freehand. So the board has to be flat on the table, fingers on top, and if you're moving it around left and right, try to make sure your fingers don't wrap around the end. The most common accident is when you're rounding an edge, somebody's coming around and your finger touches that disc and you lose a few layers of skin on your knuckle. Now I have seen much worse accidents when they get this way and their finger gets sucked down between this and the table, and that's when you actually lose fingernails. So be very careful to keep your fingers on top of the board. Now my backhand, of course, is on back. That's fine. That's helping me move it. I just don't want you to turn into it. Now the disc sander, there's an arrow on top that points that way. It means it spins this direction. Now the side of the disc that you want to use is the left side. Now at my home I have a disc sander that spins the other way, so I'd be sanding on this side. So on the test you need an answer that's correct all of the time. And the answer of which side of the disc do I sand on, it's always the downward side of the disc. The disc, part of the disc that's going down on this table. If I'm sanding here, all the sawdust goes down as well and gets sucked out through the tube. If I'm sanding on this side, it's going up. First of all, it's easy to lose my grip because it's always wanting to lift the board up off of there. Even if I keep a hold, it's wanting to do this as it goes, and I will end up pinching my fingers. But all the sawdust is coming up in your face, and I have seen these flip up in the air almost to the ceiling before. So make sure that you are sanding on this side of the disc. The table keeps it from going anywhere. So I can even let go of it and it's not going to go anywhere. It doesn't shoot anywhere across the shop. So always on the downward side of the disc. The belt sander only goes this way, and so anywhere on there is correct. Anywhere on this belt is fine. You can use the whole thing. The disc and belt sander sand the same areas. On the test, there's a question about what areas does the belt sander sand? What areas does the disc sander sand? And the answer is the same. They both sand outside corners, they'll round them, and anything flat, a flat edge or a flat end. Okay? Outside corners and flat edges or ends, and that's it. The only one that does an inside corner is that drum sander that's located against the wall. So that's the only one that'll do it. So these two sand the same areas. If you sand in one spot, you can see the result. Now I left this disc on here on purpose because it does have a burn on it. If I sand in one spot and just keep pushing and pushing and pushing, the heat that is generated from all that friction creates a burn. And once the disc is burned, the grit is pretty much gone. It won't work anymore. So if I sand in that area, it's just going to give me a burn. Same on this. I want to be able to move it around just a little bit so it doesn't burn, or at least don't push so hard that it creates a burn. So let me show you what that looks like. Now I don't have the fan running, so you may see some sawdust pop out a little bit. But if I sand on the burn itself, you can see the corner gives me a burn, and the whole thing would look that way if I continued going in that area. So if you sand on a burn, it does take a little bit, just a little bit off, but it just smells. I can smell the smoke, it smells terrible, and that doesn't look good. And I have to actually sand that out later because I don't want the burn. While you're sanding, try to use the whole area. You want to move it a little bit left and right here and here as you're sanding, kind of for the same reason as the previous question. Even if I'm not pushing hard enough to burn it, I don't want to put a lot of wear and tear on the belt or the disc. So while you're sanding, try to use more of the disc or the belt sander, a little bit left, a little bit right as you're going, to even that out, even that wear and tear out. And the last thing is, what if I have an odd shape? Well, an odd shape meaning, what if I have to cut out, say, like a push stick for the table saw? I have to cut that out, and then there's a hole right there. That's an odd shape. Let's say I want to cut that out. Now, I have actually seen students that come, and they, of course, have to get rid of all of this stuff. This is all scrap. And, of course, down here. They draw this out, they come immediately to the sander, and they start sanding away, little by little, getting in here. And by the time they're done, they've taken all period long. My disc is burned or worn out completely. There's a big cloud of sawdust all around on this side of the shop. It's just as simple as, guys, cut it out usually on the bandsaw first. Cut away about 1/8 of an inch to the line, cut this out, and then come to the sander. And that'll save you a lot of time. It saves my disc and the belt from wearing out too fast. And it's just the correct way to do it. Cut it out first, and then come to the sander. I just don't want anyone standing here all period long, just wasting time sanding away, and you're just wasting my disc, wasting the belts. So make sure that when you're sanding, your fingers are on top. Fingers are always on top, not wrapped around the sides, unless it's the outside. My left hand doesn't even get close to that. And on this one, I also left this belt on. You can see a tear right here. And I left that on so you can kind of see what it looks like. Now, when you come to use it, of course, that'll be gone. But if you see any kind of rip or tear, a bunch of burns on here, let me know. I either need to replace this, and this does need to be replaced, or I need to clean it. Now, I have a little rubber stick that is made for sanders, and if I stick it in here and sand it, it removes all of the extra sandpaper from the grit. So it makes it last a lot longer. You just need to let me know. But any tears, if I hit that just right, it could shred the belt, and then pieces go flying. So once safety is done, I'll get this replaced, so you make sure to have a good belt and a good disc to use. So use these carefully. Don't ever push too hard, and take your time, and you'll get a good edge every single time. This demonstration talks about the drill press. Now, the drill press is a fairly simple machine to use. You simply put the bit in there, put your board under it, and pull, and it drills through for you. The drill press has a variable speed on this side. If I loosen this, I can pull it up and down, and the speed of the machine will go up and down. For most drilling operations, I leave it in the middle, approximately in the center, so around 1,500 RPMs, give or take. So for the test, it says, what speed do you cut most things at? Just put medium speed. Now the drill press, we usually use a twist drill bit. And this is a keyless chuck, kind of like a drill, like a hand drill. And you can put it in simply and then tighten this right here, and now it's in. It's very easy. But the thing to remember is this chuck has 3 fingers on top that grab the bit, and when you tighten it, it actually pulls the bit up just a little bit as it tightens. So if we put the bit all the way in there and then try to tighten, the bit's already at the top. It's maxed out. So I can't tighten this all the way like I want to. So loosen it up and simply pull it out about 1/4 inch, and now when I tighten it down, now it tightens better. It'll stay there. It won't fall out in the middle of your cuts. On the drill press, it has a moving table on it. This is called a backing board, but the whole table will move up and down. Before you need to move it, there's a crank right here. Before you move it, there's a bolt on the back side that you need to loosen. Loosen that first, and now it's simple. I can raise it up and lower it back down, no problem. If you forget to loosen that bolt first, tighten that back up, then the teeth that are right here, there's a bar with teeth on it that go all the way down, that will start to bend, or you'll shear off the teeth. They won't mesh together anymore, and then I got to buy another one. So make sure this bolt in the back is loosened first. The backing board is on here, not necessarily to protect the table, because I've got a nice big hole here and I won't drill into it, but mostly because it'll give me a better cut with it. Now let me quick show you. If I take the backing board off and drill a hole, if I go just right through it, now it's hard to see, but I've got a lot of tear out here and there. It actually grabbed the last 1/16 of an inch of the board and ripped it out. And the reason is because there's nothing below it. There's nothing to support that last 1/16 of an inch. Well, we put in the backing board, and that gives us that support. Doesn't matter which side you use. I'm just going to pick a spot that doesn't have a lot of holes in it. Now when I use it, the machine doesn't know that this is 2 separate pieces. It feels like it's going through one solid piece. So now when I look, you can see there's the one I did previously. It tore out a lot around it. This one is a nice clean hole on both sides. So the backing board allows us to get a much cleaner cut. It doesn't allow that tear out that without it. That happens without the board. So as we continue on, so the backing board gives you a cleaner cut. The closer your hand is to the blade, the safer it is. Now I know that generally goes against all the other safety for the other machines. Generally you want to keep your hand way out here, so you want to be away. And I understand that. In this case, this is what usually happens. If you're too far away, the board, you go through it and the machine wants to lift the board up off the table. Now I push back down again, but if I do it again, it'll go all the way up. It'll lift it all the way up and want to lift it off the table. Then when you push it down, it didn't go flying out of your hand, but you can see the holes here are very oval. They're not square at all. I mean, they're just messed up on both sides. So no matter what you do, the hole isn't going to turn out right. So we need to keep our hand closer to this bit or the blade here, so that it's between my thumb and forefinger, so that the pressure of my hand is straight down from the bit, from the chuck. So now when I do it with my hand nice and close, straight down and back up again, and I'm pushing straight down, then that doesn't happen. The thing I need everyone to remember and to not be afraid of is if I touch this bit while it's running, I can actually wrap my hand around it completely and it doesn't cut sideways. I mean, it doesn't cut here. It only cuts straight down. So if I put my hand straight under and did it, then you would injure yourself. But holding on to the sides and like this and bumping into it like this isn't going to hurt your hand. So here, if I went down and accidentally bumped into it with my hand, that's okay. I mean, it's not going to hurt you. It may alarm you a little, but I promise you're going to be fine. So the rule on this, the closer your hand is to this bit, the better it's going to happen. Now I also have in this cabinet right here next to it what are called a Forstner bit. I have a whole set of them. This one's a little bit different. I would not reach in and grab this. That could do some damage to you. So there are, bits that are unsafe. I would still try to put my hand fairly close, but this one you can usually be a little further away and you're still going to be fine. When you're drilling, you notice each time I drill, I'm always pushing the sawdust out of the way. A little bit of sawdust on there will make the board kind of slippery. It'll want to spin around. But more than that, the sawdust under it will lift the board up off the table just a little bit. Now, instead of having a perpendicular cut here to here, that's not 90 degrees. Now if I lift it, now my cut's going to be angled slightly, skewed. So it's not going to line up the way that you want it. So make sure to just blow away all that sawdust, brush it away, whatever it takes. If I have a tiny piece of wood, little chunk of wood that I'm really scared is going to fall out of my hand and start spinning around, all I've got to do is put a clamp on it. I've got big blue ones in the back, I've got red ones, orange ones, the small spring clamps that you can use, C-clamps, whatever. Take a clamp onto the piece, and then I hold onto the clamp, and that will keep it from spinning out. Now, once in a while, I do have students that actually do lose their grip. And this is kind of what it looks like. I'm going to drill into the center here and let go of it, and this is what happens every time. You go too fast, you don't have a good grip, and then off it goes like this and starts spinning around. Now notice that I'm keeping the bit into the board a little bit, because if that works its way down, it could go flying in any direction. I don't know where. If this happens to you, your job is to turn it off as soon as you can possibly think of it. If you just let go of this and duck and cover, this will work its way off and then go flying somewhere in my shop, and somebody's going to get hurt. So turn off the machine as quickly as you can think about it, as you can, and then just unscrew it by hand, or do it this way. Either way works. Then it comes right off, and then either re-drill it or get a new piece, whatever it is you need. What I don't want you to do, let me put that back in, while that's spinning, I do not want you to reach in and grab it. And I've seen it a lot of times in my years of teaching. Every single time somebody's reached in to grab a spinning board, it'll either hit the tips of their fingers, and that hurts a lot, but more often it hits the knuckle on the back of their thumb, because they reach in, comes around, and hits their thumb right there, and that really hurts. So don't resist that temptation to reach in and grab it. Don't grab the board, and don't leave it there either. Make sure you pull it off. So on the question on the back, if the board does fly from your hand, the first thing you do, of course, is turn it off. Then the last one talks about loose clothing and hair. Girls, if you have long hair, make sure it's tied back. Guys, if you're wearing, or everybody, if you're wearing a hoodie or anything that has really long sleeves, don't ever have them come down past your thumb or pull up your sleeves. Cords that dangle from a hoodie, anything that gets tangled in here it's just going to get wound up and pull you in. So be very careful not to put anything even close to this that's going to wind up and injure you. Drill press is probably one of the easiest machines we have in the shop, and it's easiest to use as long as you keep your hand nice and close to that bit and go smoothly, evenly through your board. We do have times that when we're cutting thick material, let's say I've got a double thick piece of wood here. If I lower this down a little bit, there we go. Once in a while we have boards that are 2 or 3 inches thick. There we go. And what happens is, as you're cutting, you cut into the board, and then about halfway through you start seeing smoke. And you're wondering, what am I doing wrong? What is wrong? What happens is the sawdust from the board really kind of fills up these flutes, is what they're called, and they stay there, and they keep getting packed in tighter and tighter the more you pull. All that wood in there is rubbing against more wood, and you know what happens when you rub 2 sticks together? You get friction and heat, and that heat starts to smolder and burn. If it gets too hot, it'll actually remove the temper out of the bit. That extra heat will make the bit weaker and dull. So if you are noticing that it keeps smoking, here's all you got to do. It's called clearing the chips. You cut, it's a thin board, but that's okay. Cut halfway, raise it out and clear the chips, and then cut all the way. Now with a thin board, of course, it doesn't stay in there very much. But it's called clearing the chips. Go halfway through your board, pull it back out, clear those chips out really quick, and then go ahead and just finish your cut. That will ease that pressure and that heat on the bit and make it last a lot longer. Drill press is a great machine to use, so make sure that you're using it safely every single time. This demonstration is going to cover how to use a chop saw or a miter saw. Now this is one of those saws that most people would have in their house. So a lot of people have had experience using one. So I'm going to give you some of the finer details on how to get your best cut out of it. This machine is a 12-inch chop saw, but it's a slider, so I can slide in and out, kind of like a radial arm saw. So on this machine, we make only two kinds of cuts. A miter cut, which is anything that's not set at 0. Right now it's set at 0 degrees. To make a miter, I simply turn the blade. Anything that's not 0 degrees is considered a miter, M-I-T-E-R, miter cut. Most of our cuts will be at 0, and that's just a cross cut. It's a straight cross cut. So of course we put our board in here, hold it with your left, and you're going to pull down with your right. And it's as simple as that. When you cut, to get the cleanest cut, make sure that the blade is going at top speed. Now what I mean by that is, you bring it down, you get it lined up. First of all, make sure the blade is up off the board before you turn it on. But when you turn it on, give it about a second or two to actually speed up. Now cut. And that'll give you the best cut. If I turn it on and I don't let it speed up, then it can't keep up with how fast you're plunging it in. It starts tearing chunks of wood out instead of shearing it off like a knife. So make sure the blade is going at top speed and drop it down or plunge it fairly slowly. Top speed blade, slowly plunge to get your best cut. If we do end up having to use the slider, and you saw when I cut, I did slightly pull it forward, most of your cuts are going to be pull it out, then turn it on and drop it down and cut away from you. If I cut down and pull towards me on a nice wide board like this, the blade is spinning this way and it wants to run at me. If I push it down in there and start pulling it the direction it already wants to go, it tends to run at me real fast, and it could jam the blade. It could keep the blade from spinning at all. So if it's a nice wide board, bring it out to the end, cut and plunge down at the end and push back. That's your safest cut. Now with that being said, and that's what you would put on the test, if it's a smaller board like this and I plunge, and as you can see I've only got maybe this much wood left to cut, I would plunge straight down and then make that tiny little forward cut. There's not nearly enough wood there for it to jam the blade or to run at me for any reason. So in general, if you don't have to use the slide, don't use the slide. You'll get better cuts if it's just an up-down plunge than you will if you're doing this. And besides, if I come all the way out, plunge, and cut, the blade will do this and try to lift the board up off the table, because I'm now cutting with the back end of the blade instead of the front. So there are those tiny little rules that you need to know to get the best cut, of when to pull, when to plunge, how fast, and things like that. The draw of this, how wide a board can it cut with that slide, is 12 inches wide. And that's easy to remember because this is a 12-inch blade. 12-inch blade, 12-inch draw. So 12 and 12. So that's easy to remember. Again, the saw makes a lot of sawdust, and you can see it all behind the saw when you come to use it. But like the other machines, if I grab a small handful of sawdust and I put it here on the saw, if I try to cut, now my board is up off the table a little bit, and I have the same problem I had on the Tiger saw. Elevated board, I get a skewed cut. It now is angled slightly. Or if I have all this sawdust here and I push it back against the fence, there's a huge gap right here that I can't push it any further. So now my cut, instead of being skewed this way, is now skewed that way, and I get an unsquare cut. So again, make sure you try to get all that sawdust out of the way before you make your cut. It should be nice and tight against the fence. The shortest board that you can cut is 4 inches long. 4 inches is about this long. That gives me a nice 3-inch margin of safety, and then I've got an inch still away from my fingers to cut. Now that still would make me nervous, but that's within reason. I'm still about this far from the blade because I can still see it, and it's not going to run or jump at me. So a 4-inch board is the shortest that I can cut on this machine. If I have a board that is warped or twisted, again, it wobbles, it doesn't sit flat. That's a great way to get a kickback because it's not sitting square to the table. It's doing this and rattling, and I'm trying to plunge a board through it. That tends to move it, and then the piece will go flying back. That's why I have some plywood against the glass behind these saws, is to prevent those kickbacks from shattering the glass and hurting somebody. To get the squarest cut, position the board down flat on the table. Hopefully it doesn't wobble at all, and nice and tight against the fence. Every machine in the shop has some kind of fence system that it has to sit against. Otherwise the board gets start moving. So hold it down flat on the table and into the fence, and my left hand is here on top. Not way out here, because it's too easy to move this. Right here on top, right where the machine is. And then my right hand does the cut. Now, of course, on this machine, you can do this way, but still the setup is the same. My right hand is on top, and my left hand does the cut. That is still certainly acceptable and safe to do. It just depends on, do you like your left side or do you like your right side? Because I have set up here a stop that just simply fits over top of this fence. And it has two tape measures. The one in front is for this machine. The one in the back is for the machine down the way. And it runs on both ends. So this end is for that one and this end is for this one. So if I want, 17 inches, I can set it up and there's my line. And now I'm forced to do it this way anyway. So again, that is perfectly acceptable. This is an accurate stop. So whatever you need, if you need to make a lot of the same length cuts as we do in a nightstand, set it up and you can make a cut, but your hand has to be on this piece. It can't be here. Now obviously my hand's too close, but even if the board was sticking out here, I need it on the piece that's pinching between these things here, so it doesn't move and shake and rattle out of the way and give you a kickback. So the next one, most of the cuts, miter cuts, are set at 45 degrees, like a picture frame. So there's 45 and we lock it in and then we make our miter cut. They don't have to be at 45 degrees, but the majority of them are. And on our nightstand, if that's what you're building, the miter cuts that we do are at 45 degrees, and that's what we're going to set it to. So that is our most common miter cut. If you're cutting and you notice that the blade is burning the end of your board, the end of the board turns black, usually that means you're either cutting too slow, but more often than that, it's just the fact that the blade is dull. If you end up with a lot of burns or you smell smoke or see it for that matter, let me know and I can quickly change the blade. I've got a new one in the back that I can put on. But we don't want burns. Burns mean that it's not cutting well, and it means you're not getting a very square cut. It's not doing a good enough job. If you do get a kickback on this machine, generally it happens when the board is down all the way plunged into there. So it happens while you're like this and then a piece goes flying. If that happens, it's pretty scary because you'll see it, come off the back and it's kind of loud. First thing I need you to do is to turn off the motor. Let go of that trigger so the blade stops spinning. If a kickback gets stuck in there, I don't want it to do any more damage. So turn off the motor and then let go and step back. Most of the time, a kickback pieces go flying back and then can ricochet up. That's why I want you to take that step back. But at least turn off the machine. Kickbacks have done a lot of damage. I've seen a kickback ruin about 2 or 3 of these teeth. They actually snapped the tooth off and I had to throw the blade away. This solid aluminum bracket here that holds on this vacuum tube has shattered off and had to be re-welded. I've seen it break this guard. It's done a lot of damage. So I want to make sure you're away from that damage and it's not getting you. I can fix the saw, but you can't be fixed. Miter saws are very common machines, so a lot of you have had the experience you need to work them safe. But make sure when you use them, set it up, hold on to it nice and tight, and then make your cut. Turn it on, let it speed up, and make your cut. Now the reason that I've done the safety demonstrations in the order I have, our first demonstration was to cut a rough length, so we trimmed an end. It's an inch longer than I wanted. Now doing that, I have 0 square sides. Because I had rough edges, these weren't square, nothing was square. Next step, jointer, I jointed the edge and got it nice and true and flat. So this is square now to the faces. Then I went to the table saw and cut off the other edge. These two are now parallel. They're correct, they're done. Now this saw, we always want to trim one end. I have no idea if these 2 ends are square or not, and I have to assume that they're not, because it wasn't square when I cut it on the tiger saw. So I simply trim an end, about 1/8 of an inch, just trim off a hair. Now I know that that end is good. It's square and perpendicular to these sides. Now I flip it, measure the other side to where I want, and then I cut off the other end. Those are the 4 steps to squaring a board. So after I've got my board, joint to working edge, table saw the other edge, that's 2 steps. Trim one end, that's step 3. Measure and cut to length, that's step 4. And now I have a nice, perfectly square board that I can either glue up or use as is. One other nice feature on the chop saw is that you are perfectly allowed to stack narrow boards. Now, you can only stack these narrow boards if in no way will you be sliding the saw to cut them, which means the boards can't be any more than somewhere around 3 inches long, 3 inches wide. So if I need to trim the ends of 2, 3, maybe even 4 boards, stack them is fine as long as I've got a good grip. Stack them up and cut them off. And now I can flip the boards, line up the other end, and now I can cut them both to the exact length that I want. And like I said, 3 or 4 boards is okay as long as your hand can cover them and they sit flat against the back fence. So stacking narrow boards is all right on the chop saw.